The text message arrived at 6 in the morning, jolting me awake with its harsh buzz against the nightstand. I squinted at the screen, still half asleep, trying to focus on the words that would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Vanessa's coming over tomorrow. Make sure the place is spotless. I mean, spotless? She has standards. No good morning. No please. Just orders. Like I was staff he'd hired instead of the woman he'd been dating for 3 years. I stared at that message for a full minute, my thumb hovering over the screen, watching those three dots appear and disappear as Marcus typed something else. And wear something nice when you meet her. First impressions matter. Don't embarrass me. Don't embarrass him. The words burned themselves into my retinas as I sat up in bed, the silk sheets I'd bought slipping down around my waist. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse apartment Marcus believed he'd earned through his charm and business acumen. The truth was considerably more interesting. I padded barefoot across the heated marble floors to the kitchen, my phone clutched in my hand like evidence at a crime scene. The coffee maker I'd installed last month gurgled to life with a single touch, another luxury Marcus had taken for granted along with everything else. While it brewed, I pulled up my banking app. My real banking app. The one linked to accounts Marcus didn't know existed. The balance stared back at me with all those beautiful zeros. 12 years of careful investment, strategic planning, and a legitimate empire built in the shadows while everyone assumed I was just another pretty face lucky enough to date Marcus Chen, the rising star of the tech investment world. If only they knew. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus. Invited some of the guys over tonight for poker. Make yourself scarce. Girls' night or something. I took a long sip of my coffee, savoring the expensive Ethiopian blend I'd discovered during a business trip to Addis Ababa 2 years ago. Marcus thought I'd been visiting my sister. In reality, I'd been finalizing a $50 million acquisition of a software company that would later become the cornerstone of my portfolio. The irony of my situation would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Marcus thought he was dating a freelance graphic designer who worked from home, making barely enough to contribute to groceries. He had no idea that the woman who quietly did his laundry and meal prepped his lunches was the silent partner behind 6 of his biggest investment wins. Let me back up. 3 years ago, I met Marcus at an industry conference in Singapore. I'd been there networking for my holding company, moving through the crowds of venture capitalists and tech entrepreneurs like a ghost, asking questions and taking mental notes. That's where I perfected my disguise, if you could call it that. I'd learned early in my career that being a young woman with money made you a target. Being a young woman pretending to have none made you invisible. Marcus had been different at first, or so I'd thought. Charming without being sleazy, ambitious without being cutthroat, or at least, that's what he'd projected. He'd approached me at the hotel bar where I was reviewing pitch decks on my tablet, asked me what I was drinking, and actually listened when I answered. We talked for hours about everything except business. He told me about growing up in Seattle, about his dreams of making it big in venture capital, about wanting to find someone who loved him for who he was, not what he could become. I'd been charmed, genuinely charmed. So I made a decision that night, one I'd later recognize as the beginning of either the best or worst social experiment of my life. I told him I was a freelance designer, showed him a portfolio I'd actually created during my college years before my first startup, and played the role of a woman just trying to make ends meet in the expensive world of tech hubs. Our relationship developed slowly, naturally. Coffee dates turned into dinners. Dinners turned into weekend getaways. 6 months in, Marcus suggested I move into his apartment, a nice two-bedroom in a trendy neighborhood that he was clearly proud of affording on his junior analyst salary. I agreed, secretly amused that my monthly passive income could have bought the entire building. The apartment I moved from, a modest studio I'd been renting specifically to maintain my cover, went back on the market the next day. Marcus helped me pack my carefully curated collection of thrift store furniture and clearance rack clothes, never once questioning why someone struggling financially would have such nice luggage, or why my laptop, which I claimed was a hand-me-down, was actually the latest model with custom security modifications. For the first year, everything was good. Better than good. Marcus was attentive, supportive, encouraging about my fictional design career. When he got promoted to senior analyst, he took me to an expensive restaurant and proposed we upgrade to a bigger place. I suggested looking at some listings, secretly steering him toward properties I already owned through my real estate investment trust. That's how we ended up in the penthouse. Marcus believed he'd found an incredible deal through a contact at work. In reality, I'd had my property manager offer him a below-market rate on one of my premier units. I wanted to see how he'd react to success, to having more than he'd ever had before. Would he become generous, grateful, humble? The answer, unfortunately, was none of the above. The change was gradual, like watching someone slowly reveal their true self, frame by frame. First, it was small comments about my career. Still doing logo designs? Maybe you should aim higher. Then observations about my appearance. Vanessa from accounting always looks so put together. You should ask her for style tips. Vanessa. Even then, her name was coming up in conversations, dropped casually like she was just a colleague, just another person at the office. By year 2, Marcus had made junior partner at his firm, a promotion I'd quietly orchestrated by funneling a major investment opportunity through his desk. I wanted to reward him, to see him succeed. I thought his success would make him happy, would make us happy. Instead, it made him insufferable. The poker night started then. Every Thursday, Marcus would invite his work friends over, and I'd be expected to either serve them drinks and snacks or make myself scarce. I chose the latter, spending those evenings in the study I'd claimed as my home office, trading stocks and reviewing acquisition proposals while they laughed and bragged in the living room. I learned a lot during those poker nights. They never bothered to lower their voices, never considered that I might be listening when they talked about their deals, their insider information, their plans to leverage relationships and manipulate outcomes. I documented everything, not because I planned to use it, but because information was currency, and I'd built my fortune on knowing things other people didn't. Last Thursday, exactly 1 week before the message about Vanessa's visit, I'd overheard something that made me stop typing mid-email. Just saying, man, you could do better, someone said. I recognized the voice as Jason, one of Marcus's partner colleagues. No offense to your girl, but she's not exactly climbing any ladders. Vanessa, though, that woman's going places. Trust me, I know, Marcus had replied, and the casual agreement in his voice made my blood run cold. I'm working on it. Working on it. 2 words that implied so much. I'd sat there in my office, my fingers frozen over the keyboard, listening to them laugh and shuffle cards, and I'd made a decision. It was time for my little social experiment to end. It was time for Marcus to learn exactly who he'd been dating. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that morning, the morning of the message about Vanessa's visit, the morning everything started to fall into place. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I finished my coffee and opened my laptop, pulling up the secure portal I used for my investment firm. 3 new opportunities had come in overnight, each one representing millions in potential profit. I reviewed them methodically, making notes, flagging the most promising for deeper analysis. This was my morning routine, had been for years, conducted in secret while Marcus slept in, believing his girlfriend was probably scrolling through Instagram or looking at Pinterest boards for apartment decoration ideas. Around 8, I heard him stirring in the bedroom. I quickly closed my investment windows and pulled up Photoshop, opening an old design file just as he walked into the kitchen, hair mussed, wearing the pajama pants I'd bought him for Christmas. "Morning," he said, not looking at me as he grabbed a protein shake from the fridge. These were the shakes I meal prepped for him every Sunday, exactly the way he liked them, with the exact supplements his trainer had recommended. "You get my messages?" "I did," I said carefully, keeping my voice neutral. "Vanessa's visiting?" "Yeah, she wants to see the place. We've been working on this huge deal together and I mentioned the penthouse. She was curious." He finally looked at me, and there was something challenging in his gaze. "That okay with you?" What could I say? "No, it's not okay for your work colleague to visit the apartment that I actually own and you think you're paying for?" "No. I don't appreciate being treated like a housekeeper in my own home." Instead, I smiled that same practiced smile I'd perfected over years of business negotiations. "Of course. What time tomorrow?" "Around 2. And seriously, please make sure everything's perfect. Vanessa's used to a certain standard." He paused, taking a long drink of his shake. "Maybe you could, I don't know, tidy up your office? The door's usually open, and it looks kind of cluttered with all your design stuff." My office. The room with its 3 monitors, secure filing cabinets, and state-of-the-art workstation. The room where I'd conducted video conferences with CEOs and reviewed quarterly reports from companies Marcus probably dreamed of investing in, cluttered with my design stuff. "I'll take care of it," I said. "Great. And wear that blue dress tomorrow?" "The one I got you for my company party. You looked good in that." The blue dress he'd gotten me, the dress I'd bought for myself from a boutique in Paris, then had delivered to his office so he could surprise me with it after I'd dropped hints about liking it. The dress that cost more than his monthly car payment. "Sure," I said. Marcus nodded, satisfied, and headed for the shower. I waited until I heard the water running, then pulled out my phone and made a call. "Natalie, it's me. We need to move up the timeline." Natalie Park was my lawyer, my fixer, and one of 3 people who knew exactly who I was. We'd met in law school before I'd dropped out to start my first company, and she'd been with me ever since, handling everything from corporate acquisitions to the complex web of shell companies and trusts that kept my identity secure. "How soon?" she asked, her voice crisp and professional even at 8 in the morning. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m. I'm done with this experiment." "The boyfriend?" "Found himself a girlfriend. Wants me to clean the house for her visit." There was a long pause, then a low whistle. "He actually said that?" "Texted it. I'm forwarding you the messages now." "Jesus. Okay. I'll have everything ready." "You sure about this? Once we start, there's no walking it back." I thought about Marcus in the shower, probably planning what he'd say to Vanessa tomorrow, how he'd impress her with his penthouse and his success, never realizing that none of it was his. I thought about 3 years of playing small, of pretending to be less than I was, of watching someone I'd cared about transform into someone I didn't recognize. I'm sure. Let's burn it all down. Music to my ears. I'll send over the documents within the hour. And Lily? Yeah? Make it spectacular. I hung up and looked around the kitchen, at the custom cabinets I'd selected, the imported appliances I'd chosen, the art on the walls I'd commissioned from up-and-coming artists whose careers I'd quietly supported. Tomorrow, Marcus would bring Vanessa here, would show off this life he thought he'd built, and I would show him exactly how wrong he was. But first, I had a house to clean. I spent the rest of the day going through the motions of my cover story. I did laundry, organized closets, scrubbed bathrooms that were already spotless thanks to the cleaning service that came twice a week. The service Marcus thought was included in the building's amenities, but that I actually paid for separately. I worked methodically, room by room, all while my mind calculated and planned. Around noon, my laptop pinged with an encrypted email from Natalie. The subject line read simply, "Game time." Inside were documents that would unravel Marcus's entire world. Bank statements showing his accounts were about to be frozen for suspicious activity. Legal notices about the penthouse lease violation. Employment verification requests that would reveal some very interesting discrepancies in his investment portfolio. And my personal favorite, a complete dossier on Marcus and Vanessa's relationship, courtesy of the private investigator Natalie had hired 3 weeks ago. Turned out they'd been seeing each other for 6 months. Dinners, hotel rooms, weekend trips she'd supposedly taken to visit her parents. The Thursday poker nights had become convenient cover for the nights Marcus would leave after everyone else, claiming he was too drunk to drive safely, and end up at Vanessa's apartment across town. I should have been hurt. Maybe part of me was. But mostly, I felt vindicated. My instincts had been right. The man I'd thought might be different was exactly like all the others, just better at hiding it. And now he was going to learn what happened when you underestimated a woman you thought you knew. That evening, Marcus's poker night arrived right on schedule. I heard them filing in around 7, their voices loud and confident, the sound of men who believed they owned the world. I stayed in my office, door closed, headphones on, supposedly working on some design project with a tight deadline. Around 9, there was a knock on my door. "Yeah?" I called out. Marcus opened the door a crack. Behind him, I could hear laughter and the clink of poker chips. "Hey, can you do me a favor? We're out of those fancy cheese things you made last time. Could you whip up some more?" The fancy cheese things. He meant the aged Gruyere and truffle crackers I'd prepared, using ingredients that cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. Things I'd made because I'd thought we were building a life together, hosting friends together, being a team. "I'm actually in the middle of something important," I said, gesturing to my computer screen, which currently displayed a very important acquisition proposal that Marcus would never understand. "Maybe order some pizza?" His expression darkened. "Are you serious right now? I'm asking you for one small thing. And I'm telling you, I'm working." "On what? Another logo for some startup that can barely pay you?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Come on, Lily. It's not like you're closing million-dollar deals in there." If only he knew. "Fine," I said, standing up. "I'll make your fancy cheese things." I brushed past him into the hallway, not missing the way he rolled his eyes at Jason, who was watching from the living room. The universal gesture of men who thought themselves superior to the women in their lives. In the kitchen, I prepared the cheese and crackers, arranging them on a platter with the precision of someone who'd catered actual corporate events. I could hear them in the other room, their conversation drifting over the music Marcus had put on. "Vanessa's coming tomorrow," Marcus was saying. "Finally gets to see the place." "About time, man. When are you going to make that move?" This was Derek, another colleague I'd seen at Marcus's company parties. "Soon. Just need to time it right. Can't rush these things." "What about the current situation?" Jason asked, his voice dropping slightly. "Lily? She'll be fine. Probably won't even notice until I'm gone. Girl's got no ambition, no drive. She'll find some other guy to coast off of." The words hit harder than I'd expected. Not because they hurt, but because they revealed just how little Marcus had ever really known me. How thoroughly I'd succeeded in my experiment, and how completely he'd failed as a human being. I picked up the platter and walked back to the living room, setting it down on the coffee table with a bright smile. "Here you go, guys. Enjoy. Thanks, babe, Marcus said absently, already reaching for a cracker. I went back to my office, closed the door, and opened my laptop. Then I began making calls. First to my accountant, then to my property manager, then to Natalie again. By midnight, everything was in place. Every piece was positioned exactly where it needed to be. Tomorrow, Vanessa would get her tour of the penthouse, and Marcus would get an education in who he'd really been living with. I barely slept that night, my mind running through scenarios and possibilities. When dawn broke, I was already awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Marcus snore beside me. He'd crawled into bed around 3, smelling like whiskey and cigars, and had immediately passed out without a word to me. At 7, my phone buzzed with a message from Natalie. Everything's ready. Legal team on standby. Bank accounts flagged. Property manager briefed. Have fun today. I smiled in the darkness of the bedroom. Have fun? Yes, I thought I would. Marcus slept until 10, sleeping off his poker night hangover. When he finally emerged, I was in the kitchen, coffee made, the apartment already spotless from yesterday's cleaning. He looked at me with bleary eyes, grabbed some aspirin from the cabinet, and downed them with orange juice. Vanessa's still coming at 2, right? I asked sweetly. Yeah, you all set? Absolutely. The place looks perfect. I even cleaned out my office like you asked. He nodded, satisfied. Good. I'm going to hit the gym, shower, then I'll be back by 1:30. We can do a final walkthrough then. Sounds great. After he left, I had 4 hours to prepare. I started with getting dressed, selecting that blue dress he'd requested. It fit perfectly, hugging my figure in all the right places. I did my makeup carefully, styled my hair, put on the jewelry he'd given me for our anniversary. Jewelry I'd actually purchased for myself, of course. But he didn't know that. At noon, the doorbell rang. I checked the camera feed on my phone and smiled. Right on time. I opened the door to find Natalie standing there with a rolling briefcase and a predatory smile that would have made a shark nervous. Ready for this? She asked, stepping inside. More than ready. We spent the next hour going over everything. The documents were all in order, every legal angle covered. Natalie had even brought a notary, who set up a portable station in my office. We reviewed the timeline, the reveals, the exact sequence of events that would unfold once Vanessa and Marcus arrived. This is going to be the most expensive house tour in history, Natalie said with a grin. He earned it, I replied. At 1:15, I got a text from Marcus. On my way back. Vanessa will be there at 2. Natalie and her team packed up their materials, leaving behind only what we'd need for the afternoon's performance. She gave me a quick hug at the door. Give him hell? She said. Oh, I plan to. Marcus arrived at 1:30, freshly showered and wearing his best suit. He looked good, I had to admit. Confident, successful, every inch the rising venture capital star. He did a quick walk around the apartment, nodding approval at the pristine condition. Perfect, he said. You did good. Thanks, I said, my voice demure and grateful. Playing the role one last time. At 1:55, the doorbell rang. Marcus checked his reflection in the hallway mirror one last time, straightened his tie, and opened the door. Vanessa stepped inside, and I'll give her this. She was beautiful. Tall, elegant, with long dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore a designer outfit that probably cost more than Marcus thought I made in a month, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never had to pretend to be less than she was. Marcus, she said warmly, leaning in to kiss his cheek. A moment too long, a gesture too familiar. Then she turned to me, her smile not quite reaching those intelligent eyes. And you must be Lily. I've heard so much about you. I bet she had. It's wonderful to meet you, Vanessa, I said, extending my hand. Her handshake was firm, professional, the grip of someone used to power. Marcus has mentioned you a lot as well. I hope good things, she said with a laugh. Of course, I lied smoothly. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Water? I also have some excellent wine if you'd prefer. Water would be lovely, thank you. While I went to get water, I heard Marcus begin the tour, his voice animated and proud. So, this is the living room. We've got a great view of the city from here. That's all original artwork on the walls. The couch is Italian leather. Our couch. Our artwork. Our life that he thought he was showing off. I returned with 3 glasses of water on a tray, plus some of those fancy crackers from last night. Vanessa accepted hers gracefully, taking a small sip while her eyes roamed over everything, evaluating, pricing, judging. It's a beautiful space, she said. You must have an excellent eye for design, Lily. Actually, Marcus jumped in. Most of this came with the place. It was a lucky find. A developer's model unit that they were liquidating. We got it fully furnished. Vanessa's eyebrows rose slightly. Really? How fortunate. Incredibly fortunate, I agreed, sharing a look with her that Marcus completely missed. Marcus has always been lucky that way. Let me show you the rest, Marcus said, taking Vanessa's elbow and guiding her toward the hallway. The bedrooms are back this way. The master has a walk-in closet that's bigger than most people's apartments. I followed behind them, watching as Marcus opened doors and gestured proudly at crown molding, hardwood floors, and high-end fixtures. Watching as Vanessa nodded and smiled and asked appropriate questions. Watching as they moved together with a familiarity that spoke of more than just work colleagues. And this is Lily's office, Marcus said, opening the door to my workspace. She works from home doing graphic design. Vanessa stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room that I'd carefully rearranged that morning. Gone were the 3 monitors and the evidence of my actual work. In their place was a single laptop, some design books, a few sample portfolios. The props of the life Marcus thought I lived. Cozy, Vanessa said, and I couldn't tell if she meant it as a compliment or an insult. It's enough for what I do, I said modestly. We moved on to the master bedroom, and I watched Vanessa's eyes linger on the king-sized bed, the luxurious bedding, the view of the city skyline. Was she imagining herself here? Planning how she'd redecorate once I was out of the picture? The bathroom's through here, Marcus said, opening another door to reveal the spa-like ensuite with its soaking tub and rainfall shower. Original fixtures, heated floors, really top of the line. I can see that, Vanessa said. Marcus, you've done very well for yourself. There it was. That phrase that acknowledged Marcus as the source of all this success, this luxury, this life. The phrase that erased me completely from the equation. Marcus beamed. I've been lucky. Hard work, smart investments, being in the right place at the right time. And modest too, Vanessa teased, touching his arm in a gesture that was entirely too comfortable for colleagues. We completed the tour back in the living room, where Vanessa settled onto the couch with her water, crossing her legs and looking every bit like she belonged there. Marcus sat beside her, angled toward her in a way that excluded me entirely from their conversation. So, Lily, Vanessa said, turning to me with polite interest. Marcus mentioned you're a freelance designer. What kind of projects do you typically work on? This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment when I could start pulling threads and watch everything unravel. I sat down in the chair across from them, crossed my legs, and smiled. Actually, Vanessa, I think there's been a bit of a misunderstanding about what I do. Marcus frowned. Lily? No, really. I think Vanessa deserves to know the truth. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and turned the screen toward her. I'm not exactly a struggling freelance designer. Vanessa's eyes widened as she looked at the balance. 7 figures, just in that one account. I don't understand, she said slowly. Let me explain, I said, standing up and walking to the window. 3 years ago, I met Marcus at a conference in Singapore. I was there for business. I own several companies, you see. But I'd learned that being a wealthy woman made me a target for a certain type of man, so I decided to try an experiment. I told Marcus I was a freelance designer, lived modestly, pretended to be someone I wasn't. Lily, what are you doing? Marcus's voice was strained. I'm giving Vanessa the full tour, darling. Isn't that what you wanted? I turned back to them, watching the confusion and dawning realization play across their faces. You see, Vanessa? This apartment? I own it. Not Marcus. Me. In fact, I own this entire building plus 3 others in this neighborhood. That's insane, Marcus said, standing up. She's lying, Vanessa. I don't know what kind of game this is, but… No game, I said calmly. I pulled up another app on my phone, this one showing the property management interface. With a few taps, I pulled up the lease agreement for the penthouse. See? Lillian Chen, property owner. Marcus Chen, tenant. Subsidized rent of 42% below market rate. Paid through an account that I ultimately fund. Marcus's face had gone white. You can't. That's not… But wait, there's more, I said, warming to my theme. I pulled up another file on my phone and began reading. Remember that big investment opportunity you landed last year, Marcus? The one that made you junior partner? That came through one of my venture funds. I specifically directed it to your desk. No, he whispered. Yes, and that's not all. Should I tell Vanessa about the other investments I've quietly funneled to you? The insider information I've strategically leaked through channels that would eventually reach you? The deals I've set up to make you look brilliant? Vanessa was staring at Marcus now, her expression unreadable. Is this true? I had no idea, Marcus stammered. Lily, if this is true, why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to see what kind of man you really were, I said simply. I wanted to know if you'd love me for me, or if you'd show your true colors once you thought you had success. And Marcus? You failed spectacularly. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up a folder that I'd left there earlier, hidden under some design magazines. I opened it and pulled out printed copies of the text messages, the private investigators' photos, the hotel receipts. I know about you and Vanessa, I said, laying them out one by one. 6 months, multiple hotels, weekend getaways, the Thursday poker nights that were really cover for nights at her place. I looked at Vanessa. Did he tell you about me? Or were you under the impression he was single? Vanessa's perfect composure cracked. He said you were just a roommate, someone who helped with bills. A roommate, I repeated, looking at Marcus. Is that what I was? Lily, please, Marcus said, and now there was desperation in his voice. Let's talk about this privately. I can explain. Oh, I think Vanessa deserves to hear this, don't you? Since she's been so interested in your apartment, your success, your life, she should know the truth about all of it. My phone buzzed. A text from Natalie. Accounts frozen. Employment verification sent. Legal notices filed. You're clear to proceed. I looked up at Marcus and smiled. You know what's happening right now? While we've been having this lovely conversation, my legal team has been very busy. Your bank accounts are being frozen for investigation into potential fraud. Your employer is receiving documentation showing some interesting discrepancies in your investment sources. And your lease on this apartment? Officially terminated as of noon today for violation of the morality clause. You can't do this, Marcus said, but his voice was weak. I can, and I have. You see, Marcus, The problem with pretending to be bigger than you are is that eventually, someone bigger comes along. And I've been bigger than you this entire time. You just never bothered to look. Vanessa stood up, smoothing her skirt. I think I should go. Probably wise, I agreed. Though, before you do, I have one question. Did you love him? Or were you just interested in what you thought he had? She had the grace to look uncomfortable. He was successful, ambitious, going places. In other words, you loved his apparent success, just like he stopped loving me once he thought he'd outgrown me. I shook my head. You two deserve each other, honestly. But neither of you will have him or his imaginary success to build on. Vanessa gathered her purse and headed for the door. She paused there, looking back at Marcus. Good luck with all this. Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a soft click that somehow felt final. Marcus stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by luxury that had never been his, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Who are you? He whispered. I'm exactly who I always was, I said. You just never bothered to find out. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the marble floor. In that light, Marcus looked smaller somehow, diminished, like a child caught playing dress-up in his parents' clothes. What happens now? He asked. I smiled, and there was no warmth in it. Now? Now you leave my home. You have until end of business tomorrow to remove your belongings. Anything left after that will be disposed of. Your bank accounts will remain frozen until the investigation is complete, which should take about 6 months. Your employment is likely going to be terminated once your company realizes that most of your successful deals came from sources you can't legitimately explain. And your reputation in the industry? I shrugged. Well, word spreads fast in our circles. You're destroying my life, he said, and there was something like wonder in his voice. No, Marcus. I'm just stepping out of the way and letting you see what your life actually is without me propping it up. The destruction? That's all you. He stood there for a long moment, and I could see him cycling through emotions, denial, anger, grief, and finally, resignation. Then he walked to the bedroom without another word. I heard drawers opening, closets sliding, the sounds of someone hastily packing their life into bags. I stayed in the living room, looking out at the city I'd conquered, the empire I'd built, the life I'd created all on my own. 20 minutes later, Marcus emerged with 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. He stood by the door, looking around the apartment one last time. I loved you, he said finally. No, I corrected gently. You loved what you thought I was. You loved someone small and manageable and grateful. You never knew me well enough to love the real me. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then closed it. What could he say? We both knew I was right. Goodbye, Marcus. Goodbye, Lily. The door closed behind him, and I was alone in my penthouse, surrounded by my things, living my real life for the first time in 3 years. My phone buzzed with a message from Natalie. How'd it go? I typed back. Perfectly. He's gone. It's over. Meet for drinks tonight to celebrate? Absolutely. Let me just finish something first. I walked to my office, the real office that I'd kept hidden behind a false wall. I pushed the bookshelf aside and stepped into my actual workspace, with its 3 monitors, secure servers, and walls of filing cabinets containing the documentation of my actual empire. I sat down at my desk, pulled up my investment portfolio, and began reviewing the opportunities that had come in this week. A tech startup in Berlin that needed funding, a real estate development in Miami, a manufacturing company in Taiwan looking for a strategic partner. This was who I really was. Not Marcus's disappointing girlfriend or his convenient roommate or his housekeeper. I was Lillian Chen, self-made millionaire, strategic investor, and someone who'd just taught a very expensive lesson to a man who'd underestimated her. My phone rang. An unknown number. I answered it carefully. Ms. Chen, this is Detective Morrison with the Financial Crimes Unit. We received your documentation regarding the suspicious investment activities of a Marcus Chen. I wanted to discuss your complaint. Of course, Detective. I have extensive records of everything you'll need. As I began walking him through the files Natalie and I had prepared, I looked around my office, at the evidence of everything I'd built, everything I'd achieved, everything I really was. The experiment was over. Marcus had proven himself to be exactly what I'd feared. But in doing so, he'd also freed me from my own disguise. No more pretending to be small. No more hiding my success. No more tolerating disrespect in my own home. From now on, I would be exactly who I was, and anyone who couldn't handle that could follow Marcus right out the door. The house was clean. The girlfriend had gotten her tour. And Marcus's bank account? Well, that was just the beginning of how thoroughly I planned to clean him out of my life. Tomorrow, I would wake up in my penthouse, in my bed, surrounded by my success, and I would be free. Free to be myself, to own my accomplishments, to never again pretend to be less than I was for anyone. But tonight, I had drinks with Natalie, a business empire to run, and a whole new chapter of my life to plan. The experiment was over, and I had won. The week after Marcus left felt like emerging from underwater. I hadn't realized how much energy it took to maintain a false identity until I stopped doing it. No more pretending to struggle with freelance work. No more hiding my laptop screen when he walked by. No more playing small in my own home. I spent Monday morning on a video call with my executive team, people who'd worked with me for years and never questioned my authority. It felt good to be visible again, to use my real voice, to make decisions worth millions without second-guessing how it would look to someone who thought I made barely enough for groceries. The Berlin startup looks promising, said Richard, my CFO. But they're asking for 15 million. That's aggressive for their stage. Counter with 12, but include performance milestones, I said. If they hit their targets, we'll release the additional 3. Standard terms. Done. And Lily? It's good to have you back. I smiled. It's good to be back. After the call, I walked through the penthouse with fresh eyes. Without Marcus's presence, the space felt different, lighter. I opened windows, let in air, and began mentally cataloging what I wanted to change. That couch he'd loved so much? Gone. The art he'd bragged about to his colleagues? I'd rotate in pieces from my storage unit, things I'd collected over years but never displayed because they would have raised too many questions. My phone buzzed with a call from Natalie. Morning, Empress of Revenge. How are you feeling? Surprisingly good, I admitted. I thought I'd be more upset. That's because you processed the grief while you were still with him. You mourned the relationship long before it actually ended. She paused. Speaking of endings, I have updates. Marcus tried to access his accounts this morning, called his bank 3 times, then called me. He has your number? I may have left my card with the legal notices. He was emotional. I can imagine. What did he want? Mostly to yell about illegal freezes and false accusations. I let him vent, then explained in very small words that flagging suspicious investment patterns for regulatory review is neither illegal nor false. The investigation is legitimate, and he'll have his chance to provide documentation proving his investment sources were above board. Which he can't do. Which he absolutely cannot do. Because most of his successful deals came from you, and he has no legitimate explanation for how he consistently had access to information before anyone else. Natalie's smile was audible. He threatened to sue you, by the way. On what grounds? Emotional distress, fraud, conspiracy to damage his career. the usual desperate flailing of a man who just realized he's been playing checkers while you were playing chess. I laughed, despite myself. What did you tell him? That any lawsuit he files will require him to sit for a deposition, where we'll ask very detailed questions about his relationship with Vanessa, his use of insider information, and the source of his apparent wealth. He hung up after that. Good. What about Vanessa? Interesting development there. She called her HR department yesterday and requested an immediate transfer to their Boston office. Apparently, she'd rather relocate across the country than face the fallout at headquarters. Smart woman. Smarter than Marcus anyway, though that's a low bar. Natalie shifted gears. Have you thought about what comes next? For you, I mean. You're free now. No more hiding. What do you want to do with that freedom? I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the city's skyline. What did I want? For 3 years, I'd been so focused on the experiment, on maintaining the illusion, that I hadn't let myself think beyond it. I want to be visible, I said slowly. I want to attend those conferences under my real name. I want to stop hiding my successes. I built something incredible, and I'm tired of pretending I didn't. Then do it. You've earned it. After we hung up, I sat down at my real desk in my real office and opened my calendar. 3 industry conferences in the next 6 months, all events I'd previously avoided because maintaining my cover meant staying invisible. Not anymore. I registered for all 3 under my full name and company credentials. Lillian Chen, founder and CEO of Apex Holdings. Let the world see who I really was. The rest of the week passed in a blur of productivity. Without the energy drain of maintaining my false identity, I found myself accomplishing more than I had in months. I closed the Berlin deal, opened negotiations with a promising AI startup in Seoul, and restructured my real estate portfolio to maximize returns. I also did something I'd been wanting to do for years. I set up a foundation. The Lillian Chen Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs would provide seed funding and mentorship to women starting their own businesses. No more watching talented women struggle because venture capitalists couldn't see past their gender. On Friday evening, Natalie arrived with Thai food and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly salary had been. Celebration dinner, she announced, setting everything up on my dining table. 1 week of freedom, how does it feel? Surreal, I admitted, pouring us both wine. I keep expecting Marcus to walk through the door. Keep catching myself about to hide my laptop screen or minimize my trading windows. That'll fade. Trauma responses take time to unlearn. Natalie raised her glass. To new beginnings and the spectacular downfall of mediocre men. We clinked glasses, and I took a long sip of wine that tasted like victory. So, Natalie said, loading up her plate with pad thai, I heard through the grapevine that Marcus showed up at his office on Wednesday. He still has a job? For now, but apparently it was quite a scene. He tried to act like everything was normal, but word had spread. The frozen accounts, the investigation, the questions about his investment sources. His colleagues were giving him a wide berth. And Vanessa? Already in Boston. Took emergency PTO and was on a plane by Tuesday night. Left Marcus to face the music alone. I thought about that. About Vanessa's quick escape. Part of me almost respected it. She'd assessed the situation, realized she'd aligned herself with a sinking ship, and jumped before it went under. Cold, but smart. His boss called him in for a meeting Thursday morning, Natalie continued. I have a friend in their HR department. Apparently, they put him on administrative leave pending the outcome of the financial investigation. With pay for now. But that won't last if the investigation turns up anything criminal. Will it? Turn up anything criminal, I mean? Natalie swirled her wine thoughtfully. That depends on how Marcus explains his investment patterns. If he claims he just got lucky, he looks incompetent now that his luck's run out. If he admits someone was feeding him information, he has to explain who and why, which leads back to you. And if he tries to blame you, he has to admit he was living off his girlfriend's charity while treating her like hired help. Checkmate from every angle. That's what happens when you plan things properly. She grinned. You know what the best part is? You didn't actually do anything illegal. You just stopped helping him and let natural consequences take over. I may have accelerated those consequences slightly. True, but freezing his accounts for investigation, that came from actual suspicious patterns. Questioning his investment sources, that came from legitimate regulatory concerns. Terminating his lease, he violated the morality clause by conducting an extramarital affair in the property. Natalie ticked off points on her fingers. Everything we did was perfectly legal. You just removed your protection and support, and he fell apart. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, and I found myself thinking about the past 3 years. The experiment. What had I really learned? I think I was testing myself as much as him, I said suddenly. Natalie looked up. What do you mean? The experiment? I told myself I was testing Marcus, seeing if he'd love me for who I really was. But I think part of me was also testing whether I could be happy being small, whether I needed the success and the visibility, or if I could be content with just existing quietly. And I can't. I'm not built for it. Hiding my accomplishments didn't make me humble. It made me miserable. I need to create, to build, to achieve. That's who I am. Good, Natalie said firmly. Because watching you pretend to be less than you are has been painful. You're brilliant, Lily. You built an empire from nothing. You should be proud of that, not hiding it. I am proud. Finally. I raised my glass. To being exactly who we are. To being exactly who we are? Natalie echoed. My phone buzzed with an email notification. I glanced at it, then did a double take. What? Natalie asked, seeing my expression. It's from Marcus. Subject line, please read. Don't, Natalie said immediately. Nothing good can come from that. But curiosity won. I opened the email. Lily, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this. I've spent the last week trying to understand what happened, how everything fell apart so fast. I keep going over our relationship, looking for the moment when things went wrong. I realize now that I never really knew you. I was so caught up in my own ambitions, my own image of success, that I never bothered to look deeper. You were always just there, supportive, easy. I took that for granted. I won't pretend I understand why you hid who you really were. That's your business. But I'm sorry for how I treated you. You deserved better than someone who only valued you when you reflected well on him. I'm not asking for forgiveness or another chance. I know that ship has sailed. I'm just asking you to consider backing off the investigation. My career is over if this continues. Everything I worked for, gone. I know you probably think I deserve it. Maybe I do. But please, just think about it. Marcus. I read it twice, waiting to feel something. Sympathy? Maybe. Or vindication. Instead, I just felt tired. He wants me to drop the investigation, I told Natalie. Absolutely not. That investigation is legitimate and it needs to run its course. I know. It's just, he sounds so defeated. Good. He should be defeated. He lied, cheated, and treated you like garbage. He built his career on your secret support, then mocked you for not having the success he thought he'd earned. Natalie leaned forward. Lily, listen to me. You didn't destroy Marcus. You just stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. There's a difference. She was right. I knew she was right. But there was still a small part of me that remembered the man I'd met in Singapore, the one who'd seemed kind and genuine. That man probably never really existed, but the memory still held weight. I typed out a response. Marcus, I appreciate the apology, but the investigation isn't something I can stop. It's a legitimate regulatory review triggered by patterns in your investment activity. That's between you and the authorities now. You're right that you never knew me, but I didn't know you either. I thought I was dating someone who would love me regardless of my bank account. Instead, I got someone who only valued me as long as I seemed less successful than him. I hope you learn from this. I hope you become the person you pretended to be when we first met. But that's not my responsibility anymore. Take care of yourself. Lily. I hit send before I could second guess it, then put my phone face down on the table. Done? Natalie asked. Done. We finished dinner, talking about lighter things. Natalie's new girlfriend, a defense attorney she'd met at a legal conference. My plans for the foundation. The upcoming conferences where I'd finally attend as myself. After she left, I stood in the penthouse alone, looking around at the space that was finally, truly mine. No more pretending. No more hiding. Just me and the life I'd built. Over the next month, I watched from a distance as Marcus's world continued to unravel. The investigation found enough irregularities to warrant a formal inquiry. His firm put him on unpaid leave, then quietly let him go with a non-disclosure agreement that prevented him from discussing the circumstances. His apartment, the one he'd moved to after leaving mine, was in a much less prestigious building, and according to my property manager's network, he was struggling to make rent. Vanessa stayed in Boston. I heard through industry contacts that she'd taken a significant step down in title and responsibility to make the transfer happen. Her career had stalled, probably would never recover to where it had been. Association with Marcus had tainted her professional reputation. I should have felt more satisfaction in their downfalls. Instead, I mostly felt relief that they were no longer my problem. The foundation launched in late spring, and I held a small event to announce it. 50 women entrepreneurs, all hungry for opportunity, all brilliant and driven, and exactly the kind of people I wished I'd had in my corner when I was starting out. I gave a speech that night, standing in front of a room full of strangers and cameras, using my real name and real credentials for the first time in years. I built my first company when I was 23, I told them. I did it alone, with no mentors and no support system, because the venture capital world wasn't interested in funding a young woman with big ideas. I succeeded anyway, but it was harder than it needed to be. I looked around the room at all those eager faces. This foundation exists because I don't want any of you to have to do it alone. We're going to fund your startups, mentor you through the challenges, and connect you with networks that would otherwise take decades to build. We're going to level the playing field. The applause was thunderous. After the speech, I spent hours talking to applicants, reviewing pitches, offering advice. This, I realized, was what I'd been missing. Not the hiding, not the pretending, but the connection. The chance to use what I'd learned to help others. At the end of the night, a young woman approached me nervously. She couldn't have been more than 25, with the determined look of someone who'd fought for every opportunity. Ms. Chen, I just wanted to thank you. I've been trying to get funding for my app for 2 years, and everyone said I needed more experience, or a male co-founder, or... She trailed off. Anyway, this foundation, it's everything I needed to hear tonight. What's your app? I asked. She launched into an explanation of a platform connecting freelance workers with short-term gigs, complete with built-in payment protection and reputation systems. It was smart, well thought out, and exactly the kind of innovative idea that traditional VCs would overlook because she didn't fit their image of a tech founder. Send me your pitch deck, I said, handing her my card. My real card this time. She looked at it, eyes widening. This has your direct email. It does. Use it. 3 weeks later, I invested in her company. 6 months after that, her app had 50,000 users and growing. She sent me updates regularly, always starting with, "Thank you for believing in me." That's what I'd been missing with Marcus. Not someone to believe in me. I'd always believed in myself, but someone who wanted me to succeed as much as I wanted them to succeed. Someone who saw my victories as shared triumphs, not threats to their ego. A year after the confrontation with Marcus, I attended a tech conference in Austin. This time, I was on a panel about women in venture capital, sitting alongside 3 other successful investors. I wore a power suit, my real jewelry, and answered questions with the confidence of someone who had nothing to hide. During the networking session afterward, a young man approached me. He looked familiar, and it took me a moment to place him. Jason, one of Marcus's poker night friends. "Ms. Chen," he said nervously, "I don't know if you remember me, but I used to work with Marcus." "I remember. I wanted to apologize. For the things we said, the way we treated you, we thought." He trailed off, looking embarrassed. "It doesn't matter what we thought. We were wrong, and we were cruel. And I'm sorry." I studied him for a moment. He looked genuine, uncomfortable in a way that spoke to real regret. "Apology accepted," I said finally. "Are you still in investment?" "Actually, I left that firm after everything happened with Marcus. Started my own consultancy. It's small, but it's honest work. Good for you." I meant it. The industry needs more honest people. He nodded, relieved, and moved on. I watched him go, thinking about the ripples of that one confrontation, how many lives it had touched and changed. That evening, I had dinner with Natalie at a restaurant overlooking the city lights. "So," she said, raising her martini glass, "1 year of freedom. How does it feel?" "Like I can finally breathe," I said honestly. "Like I'm living my actual life instead of performing someone else's." "Any regrets?" I thought about it seriously. I regret wasting 3 years on someone who didn't deserve me, but I don't regret the experiment itself. It taught me something important. What's that? That I don't need to be small to be loved. If someone can't handle my success, that's their problem, not mine. I took a sip of my own drink. The right person will celebrate my victories, not resent them. "Speaking of which," Natalie said with a sly smile, "I noticed you exchanged numbers with that keynote speaker. Dr. Williams? The AI ethics researcher?" I felt my cheeks warm. "We had an interesting conversation about responsible technology development." "Uh-huh. And that's why you were laughing together for 20 minutes after the panel?" "She's smart and funny. We might get coffee next time I'm in Seattle." "Good. You deserve someone who appreciates all of you, not just the version they're comfortable with." Dr. Rachel Williams and I did get coffee in Seattle. Then dinner. Then a weekend trip to Vancouver where we talked for hours about everything from quantum computing to our favorite books. She knew exactly who I was, had actually heard me speak at a conference years ago, and seemed genuinely impressed by my work rather than intimidated by it. "I always wondered why you kept such a low profile," she said over breakfast one morning. "You're doing incredible work with Apex Holdings and the foundation. Why hide it?" So I told her about Marcus, about the experiment, about learning to be visible again. She listened without judgment, then took my hand across the table. "Thank you for trusting me with that," she said. "And for what it's worth, I think you're extraordinary. Not despite your success, but including it." Including it. Such simple words, but they meant everything. 6 months later, Rachel moved to my city to take a position at the university. We didn't move in together. Both of us valued our independence too much for that. But we spent most evenings together, talking about our work, our dreams, our lives. She met Natalie at a dinner party I hosted, and they hit it off immediately, trading lawyer jokes and stories about dealing with difficult clients. Watching them laugh together, I felt something click into place. This was what my life was supposed to look like: authentic, visible, full of people who knew the real me and liked me anyway. 2 years after the confrontation, I got an unexpected email. The sender was Marcus, but the subject line read, "No response needed." Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Lily, I'm not writing to ask for anything or to dredge up the past. I'm writing because I owe you a real apology, one that doesn't come with excuses or requests. I've spent the last 2 years in therapy, working through why I treated you the way I did. My therapist helped me see that I was intimidated by successful women, felt I had to diminish them to feel bigger myself. That's my damage, not yours. And you bore the brunt of it. You were right about everything. I never knew you. I never tried to know you. I was too busy building an image of success to recognize that I was with someone who had actual success. I heard about your foundation. It's incredible work. Exactly the kind of thing the industry needs. I'm proud of you, for whatever that's worth. Which is probably nothing, but I wanted to say it anyway. I'm working at a small firm now. Nothing glamorous, but it's honest work. I'm dating someone who knows exactly who I am, including the mistakes I've made. I'm trying to be better. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. Marcus." I read it twice, then forwarded it to Natalie with the message, "Thoughts?" She called immediately. "Wow, that's actually a genuine apology." "I know. I don't know what to do with it." "You don't have to do anything with it." He said no response needed. He's taking responsibility for his actions without asking you to absolve him. That's actually healthy. So I just let it sit? Unless you want to respond. But you don't owe him anything, Lily. Not even acknowledgement. I thought about it for a day, then decided to send a brief reply. "Marcus, thank you for the apology. I hope therapy is helping you become the person you want to be. I'm doing well. Very happy, actually. I hope you find that too." Lily short, polite, final. I hit send and then archived the entire email chain. That chapter was closed. Time to focus on the present. The present was good. Great even. Apex Holdings was thriving, with investments across 3 continents. The foundation had funded 42 women-owned startups, and 12 of them had already achieved significant success. I'd keynoted at 5 major conferences, been profiled in 2 business magazines, and finally felt comfortable being publicly recognized for my work. Rachel and I celebrated our 1-year anniversary at the same restaurant where I'd had dinner with Natalie after Marcus left. Full circle. "I have something for you," Rachel said, sliding a small wrapped box across the table. Inside was a keychain, simple silver with an engraving. "Be exactly who you are." "I love it," I said, feeling tears prick my eyes. "I know you've had to hide yourself, pretend to be smaller than you are. I wanted you to have a reminder that you never have to do that again. Not with me, not with anyone." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Thank you for seeing all of me. Thank you for letting me see all of you. You're magnificent, Lily Chen. All of you." That night, standing on my penthouse balcony with Rachel beside me, looking out at the city lights, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The hiding, the revelation, the rebuilding. It had been painful, but necessary. I'd emerged stronger, more authentic, more myself than I'd ever been. Marcus had wanted me to clean the house for his girlfriend's visit. Instead, I'd cleaned out everything: his bank account, his career, his delusions about who held the power in our relationship. But more importantly, I'd cleaned out my own life, swept away the pretense, the hiding, the small version of myself I'd been playing. What remained was the truth. I was Lillian Chen, self-made millionaire, founder of multiple successful ventures, creator of a foundation helping other women achieve their dreams. I was someone who'd learned the hard way that love means accepting all of someone, not just the parts that make you comfortable. I was exactly who I was supposed to be. Finally, completely, unapologetically myself. And that, I realized as Rachel wrapped her arm around my waist and pointed out a constellation in the night sky, was the best revenge of all. Not destroying Marcus, though he'd certainly faced consequences, but building a life so authentic and fulfilling that he became irrelevant to my happiness. He'd wanted me small and manageable and grateful. Instead, I'd become vast and powerful and complete. The house was clean, the tour was over, and I was finally, beautifully, home. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.